Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. It's my pleasure to introduce Rowdget J. Young to you. Rowdget is the national president of the Asian Law Students Association, so another ALSA. It's not ALSA, meaning the European Law Students Association, but in this case, the Asian Law Students Association. And Rowdget, as I said, is the national president coming from Hong Kong to this organization and to us. And I'm very, very pleased to have you here, Rowdget, today, because you will give us a first-hand overview about the organization, but also about the impact of the pandemic on the organization and on students' life in Hong Kong and in other Asian countries. And I'm very much looking forward to this. Welcome to this show here. Rowdget, let's start briefly because most of the listeners obviously are Europeans, and we had the president of ALSA, so the European Law Students Association, in one of the episodes here, which makes it most interesting to most of our listeners here what ALSA, meaning the Asian Law Students Association, is, and what your main activities are, and whether there are contacts with the European Association, and whether there are any significant differences or things in common between the different organizations. Let us know, please, what ALSA is.
Okay, so thank you very much, Nicholas, for inviting me to your show. And I come to the knowledge that Ars Boni is a very popular YouTube program, which is watched by a lot of European students. And I'm very honored myself to share with you a bit about my knowledge on ALSA, my association, and as well as some experience in studying law during the pandemic. So to begin with, my name is Rowdget, and I'm the national president of ALSA, ALSA Hong Kong. So ALSA, Asian Law Students Association, was established in 2002, and we are fortunate to become one of the largest students association in the world. So currently, we have over 9,000 members in over 17 jurisdictions. So it has become the premier representative body of law students in Asia. So at the international level, we, ALSA, is regulated by the laws of association of the Swiss Civil Code, Articles 60 to 79. And this is legitimized under the written law as having its international seats in Switzerland. So basically our chapters include Brunei, mainland China, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Laos, Taiwan, as well as Vietnam. And we also have some observers in Nepal, as well as other countries. So our key principle is that we're trying to build up a passionate, hardworking, and determined group of law students who will aspire to become lawyers in the future. So our main goal, our main aim is to provide our members with the understanding of law in different jurisdictions in Asia. And then we strive a lot to motivate students to develop a creative spirit and to be internationally minded through a network of joint activities among Asian law students. So as Nicholas has pointed out, that we are actually very similar to ELSA. I noticed that Veronica, the president of ELSA, ALSA, also appeared in your show before. And she's a friend of mine, of course. And personally, ELSA and ALSA have very close bondings. So basically, ELSA and ALSA, actually, we have signed a memorandum of understanding before. And then we've recently renewed it. And so the goal of having this memorandum of understanding is to foster our bonding so as to facilitate our collaboration in the international levels as much as possible. So besides ELSA and ALSA, we actually have other similar organizations in a global perspective, such as the Australian Law Students Association, which could be simplified as ALSA as well. So we're actually an international umbrella organization that have different branches and so on.
I see. And there's an African Law Students Association, again, starting with an A, right? So there is some kind of trademark issue here because all of you sound very similar, but you're also doing very similar things. So, and your role in this organization, Rowdget, is that you're representing one of the national organizations, correct? And if so, what are your personal main activities within the organization?
Okay, thank you, Nicholas, for pointing out. So I'm the national chapter president of Hong Kong, meaning that I mostly monitor all the activities of our local chapters in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, the University of Hong Kong, the City University of Hong Kong, the Xuan University, as well as the University of Law Hong Kong branch. So basically, I also represent the interests of Hong Kong in our monthly governing council within ALSA, within ALSA, during which all the national presidents from our respective chapters in Korea, Japan, etc., will discuss the amendments of our constitution and book of guidelines, as well as we will bid for hosting various international events, etc. So basically, we have a lot of work to do. We need to communicate with our representatives in various Hong Kong universities. I need to talk with them and have regular meeting with them and to see how the promotion of our association works in their respective universities and so on. So it's a kind of hectic job, but I enjoy it so much.
Mm-hmm. And what is ALSA doing typically at the typical Hong Kong university? So is it supporting students? Is it organizing moot courts? Is it bringing in some practical input into the studies? What are the main activities that you deliver?
Well, we do a lot of activities, and we understand that because of the pandemic, it is extremely hard for us to host or hold any physical events such as a physical routing competition or a physical networking event. And I understand that. Mm-hmm. So in the past year, ALSA Hong Kong has launched a vast array of activities online to help students catch up with various interesting topics. For example, in October 10th last year, we invited Mr. Jeremy Dean QC. He ranks the first in the UK bar to be our guest speaker to have a webinar on the topic of defending the indefensible as soon. So basically, we have this lecture to invite Mr. Dean to share with our students his knowledge and his personal experience as a barrister in the UK, and how his experience could help our students to develop their interest or uncover their interest in the criminal law, etc., and so on. And this is a very successful event, and we usually have law students from all our local chapters in Hong Kong, meaning all the law schools in Hong Kong, to participate in this event. And during that, we have more than 60 members who joined in as participants, and they've raised a lot of questions to Mr. Dean QC and so on. Mm-hmm. And besides from this lecture, we also have a lot of joint events with foreign organizations, for example, as we realize that it is not sufficient if we simply hold a local event for our students. There are many types of events in Hong Kong where students could understand and network with local students from other law schools. But I think that it is not enough because, as we all know, Hong Kong is an international city. And putting Hong Kong aside, I think all law students have to possess a global vision and a global mindset so as to cope with the changes of our society. And because of that, ALSA Hong Kong has collaborated with foreign organizations, for example, Future City Lawyers from Britain, to provide a cross-border webinar. So basically, we collaborate with them to provide students with a commercial law lecture, where students could understand the packages of these future city lawyers. And what they do is that they will provide some online lectures for students to prepare them for writing their CVs and having job applications, and as well as equipping them with knowledge about the commercial and the company side of the jurisdiction and so on. Mm-hmm. And then throughout this kind of global connections or collaborations, we could possibly link students with foreign students and so on. And that will help them extend their network to a far greater extent, I think. Mm-hmm. So this is one of our activities. And we also, of course, have networking event for students. As reflected by a lot of students in Hong Kong, they complain that, well, because of the pandemic, they can't even go to school. They have to stay at home all the time and glue at the computer screen. And then they feel like, well, they have lost a lot of chances to broaden their network with students, right? So we provide them with networking events locally. And of course, and it was held on Zoom. so that we had some breakout room discussion sections for them that they could link up with students from other law schools and so on. And then we invited some prospective future legal practitioners who are, say, senior students in our law schools, and they are very active and they perform very well in their grades and so on. So they could share some of their experience to our junior law students, so as to prepare them in jobs application, in career planning, in their studies, as well as in their personal growth. So these are some highlights that we did in Hong Kong in the past year, in light of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And how is the pandemic, or what is the impact of the pandemic at the moment on the organization and on students' life?
Well, the pandemic certainly has changed our lives to a very great extent. And in the past, we expect that we will organize physical events for students so that they could have a face-to-face chat. And of course, from a traditional perspective, face-to-face chats are more preferred because we could have a better understanding of each other. And we always think that, well, online chats are way too virtual, so that we cannot have a deeper understanding of each other, and there may be some hurdles in lasting our friendship or relationship, etc. So the pandemic actually it has inspired us to think of new ways to actually change the mode of our communication, and to change our organization's orientation, which is why we start to launch a series of online activities for our students during the pandemic. And then Zoom, thanks to the invention of Zoom, we could conveniently hold different types of activities and so on. And that's why you mentioned written competition and lots of different activities, which are very popular and typical activities for law students. Mm-hmm. As for us, in the capacity of ALSA, we turn them into virtual events. So I think that this is a new normal during which everyone has to get used to. But I think that this also gives us a chance to open our horizon, because in the past, our organization, ALSA Hong Kong, doesn't have sufficient linkage with the foreign students organization, because after all, we are a national chapter. So we majorly focus on the affairs of Hong Kong alone. But because of the pandemic, it is more convenient now for us to do some online activities and so on. And that actually gives us another room for development. And throughout the advancement of technology, such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or so on, we actually are able to reach out to any other foreign students organization, not limited to our counterparts chapters in ELSA or African Students Association, or etc. We also can have collaborations with, say, MUN, the Model United Nations Club, so on. We could have reached our larger and a wider spectrum of audience because of the pandemic. So I think that we could always be cautious optimistic, despite the sadness or the kind of trouble that has been caused by the pandemic. We can actually make use of this opportunity to provide students with new types of activities. Mm-hmm. For example, we launched the Student Training Exchange Program, which is the opportunity for students to gain exposure to an international legal work environment and enhance their practical legal skills and knowledge with their partners. So in this year, we have 4 partners. One is Anglo-Thai Legal in Thailand. Mm-hmm. Another one is International Dispute Resolution and Risk Management Institute, IDRMI, in Hong Kong. The third one is Cisco Law, and the fourth one is SCG Chemicals Company Limited. So all these partner organizations are happy to provide our members with internship opportunities, as long as they could be selected in the interview progress and so on. So we hope that during this pandemic, we could help students to seek jobs or internship opportunities. And this is what we have been endeavoring to do.
Mhm, mhm. So if I understand it correctly, you would say that although the pandemic has brought a lot of problems, obviously it has also brought a lot of opportunities, in particular because of the fact that remote meetings and remote discussions are more common than they were before. Would you also say that the contact with your partner national chapters has become more intensive because of the new normal, which is that each of us and all of us are talking to each other via Zoom and other similar tools?
Exactly. I agree with you on that, Professor. So basically, the new normal has certainly changed our perspective of building connections and networks with our foreign counterparts. For example, in the past, we will host a physical pro bono conference in selective countries. For example, we will bid for being the organizing committee of a particular event, say this time is pro bono conference, and so on. Mm-hmm. And then we need to get the air tickets for our members or our participants to fly to a particular country to participate in the pro bono conference. And as you could imagine that we all live busy schedules, regardless of whether you are a law student or you're a legal practitioner. So if I were to say that we would hold a pro bono conference, say in August or in July, and then say in Hong Kong, for example, then it would be a difficulty for some of us to actually fly to Hong Kong to join the activity, say for just a few days, and then fly back to their own country. Some of us may have other engagements during the summer, say internships, works, etc. And it's not that easy for our very busy, presumably very busy guest speakers from other legal jurisdictions to fly to our city just to give a 1 day or 2 day talk. But because of the new normal, we could make every impossibility a possibility now. For example, in this year, we held the ALSA Pro Bono Conference 2021. We call it ALSA Around the World. And this title speaks for itself. We hope to collaborate with other practitioners from different various jurisdictions and so on. And this time, of course, we held it via Zoom, and then we made it possible for many busy law students to participate for 2 days on 26th and 27th of June. And then we focus on the topic of the COVID-19 context, because as we've mentioned for a couple of times, it has become a new normal. So basically, in this conference, which was held a few days ago, we brought together speakers and delegates from different national chapters to discuss the disruption of traditional pro bono and how we can better chart the way forward together. And delegates were encouraged to explore the changes to pro bono in the themes of legal technology, in the context of COVID-19, and to learn more about the upcoming role of the Public Defender's Office in pro bono efforts. So we invited Mr. Nicholas Shen in Hong Kong, who is a partner of an international law firm, and we also invited a few distinguished guests from Singapore and so on, to talk about the technology's impacts on the studies of law, and as well as in particular the pro bono works in Asia. So I think that we have a different type of life. We have a different lifestyle now during the pandemic, and that technology plays a significant role, as you've mentioned, in changing our way of life and our studies of law, of course.
Mm-hmm. I see. Did you have any European guests at this conference? Did any Europeans join?
For this conference alone, I'm afraid we don't, because we focus on the context of Asia and so on. But we did have some collaborations with ALSA and so on. I've mentioned to you just now, we've signed the Memorandum of Understanding, and then we just renewed it. So actually the memorandum itself makes a commitment to invite the European law schools to participate in our annual ALSA conference, and extends an invitation for the ELSA president, who is Veronica presently, to attend all our council meetings, and vice versa, of course.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of collaborations with with the European side, and we understand that it is very important for us to communicate more with friends from the other continents so that we could share our experience together. We're always compatible with each other. For example, we actually launched a program called Lecture Timed, LEGT, LEGIT, MED, Lecture Timed. So this is essentially an international medical legal panel discussion co-organized by us, ALSA, and as well as AMSA, which is Asian Medical Students Association. So we have a lot of similar organizations that share very similar names and so on, as well as the ELSA and the EMSA. EMSA is the European Medical Students Association. So we not only collaborate with ELSA, but we also collaborate with medical law students from Europe. And the very goal of this activity, of this panel discussion, is to facilitate medical and law students worldwide to learn and discuss with each other about the personal medical autonomy, namely euthanasia, as well as drug consumption.
I see. One of the issues that all of us are facing is how to deal with different time zones, by the way, right? So when you have such an international audience, right? So what the optimal time zone to follow then would be, because that is obviously an issue when you have Asian and Australian and Europeans and Americans in the very same conference. But Rowdget, you are not only president of a national chapter, you're also a student. So perhaps you would like to share with us how your student life has changed during the pandemic and how the perspective is going to be for autumn this year.
Okay, it is certainly a very tough time for students during the pandemic because in the past we have physical lessons, meaning that we could communicate with our professors at campus if we have any inquiries about the studies of law. And so the pandemic certainly has a negative impact on our studies of law. So I would like to cover a few aspects of the negative impacts on our studies of law. And I will talk about the good side and the positive impacts it has brought us during the COVID-19 crisis. So a controversial issue which has been caused by the corona is that it has affected our examination method, because traditionally we all have physical examination. It means we have written exams on campus, but because of the pandemic, the law school, say my law school, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, has launched the Responders Lockdown Browser System, which is essentially a lockdown system to monitor our activities online, so that we could have an online examination which lasts for the same duration as our written examination. But the only difference is that we can do it at home, but with the monitoring system, including a webcam and the software that would watch over our exam period. But some students found that there are many problems. For example, the lockdown system requires our students to glue at the screen all the time so that the webcam can trace it. And in some occasions, when students didn't look at the webcam, the system automatically logged out, so that the student must retake the exam in another occasion. And then there's no separation between the question and answer book. So if we have a written exam, then we have a physical question and answer books that could help students to highlight the key points and jot some notes on it. But with the online version, then students have to screw down the page, and that will increase their time on working on the question. And then they could not highlight the main points and print out the papers, etc. And there could be a lot of technical errors. For example, if the system was dead, I mean, if the system goes wrong, then the whole cohort or the whole body of students attending the examination will need to face a makeup exam, and that will increase the time cost for all of us. And it's from an administrative level, it's not efficient to actually hold a series of makeup exams consecutively after the failure of the system. So that is a problem that is faced by us in Hong Kong. But for the bright side, I would say that it would increase the flexibility of our legal learning, because not every one of us has a hostel in our school. So some people could live very far away from the campus. For example, myself alone, we need to spend like 45 minutes to travel to our school. I don't know whether it is a long duration in the eyes of the European, because I know that Vienna or other European cities may be much larger than Hong Kong. But from as you know, that Hong Kong is a really small and condensed city. So from our value, then spending 1 hour or 2 hours traveling time is already a very huge cost. So if you imagine you have an 8:30 lesson in the morning, then I have to wake up, say, at 6 in order to get back to school. And of course, that will be a tiring experience for most of us. But thanks to the e-learning, online learning method, I could now possibly wake up 30 minutes before my lesson to catch up a bit without facing any risk of failure to attend the lesson. And I think that is a very bright side of the online learning method during the pandemic, is that it could shorten our traveling time. And also, we have different interactive function on Zoom, say the breakout room function, as well as some very funny and entertaining little functions such as raising hand or a texting function. And that could all help improve our legal learning during the pandemic, because some of us may be too shy to raise their hands during a physical lesson. But now with technology, then they could possibly do it privately. Say they could privately message the professor in case of any inquiries and so on. So I think there's a bright side of that, is that it improves our learning efficiency. And of course, it also helps us save a lot of time to travel around different campus sites, etc. So I think there are both positive and negative impacts on the legal education.
And would you, if you look into the perspective of next year, would you expect that most of the courses will be back on campus then, or will most of the courses be online, or will there be a mixture depending on the subject and the size of the students group or any other external factor?
Well, we just received a notification email from our law school last week, claiming that we will resume our physical lessons in the coming September. So I would certainly expect that it could be subject to changes, because the pandemic situation is still a bit unstable in Hong Kong or other Asian countries as well. So I think that mixed mode is a good alternative for our students. And we have been practicing mixed mode for half a year until now. So basically, students could choose either to stay at home to watch, to attend an online lesson, or they could physically attend the lesson at school campuses. So I think it's a good choice for us to possibly judge whether we should go back to school or not, based on the situation of the pandemic. But from my perspective, from a personal perspective, I think the safety of our students should be our first priority. So in case the pandemic worsens, then I would certainly hope the law schools could cope with that by switching the lesson pattern to be completely online learning again.
And the main system that you were using at your university, if I understand it correctly, for teaching purposes was Zoom. Is this a de facto standard in Hong Kong and in the other countries that you have an overview on? So is more or less every law school using Zoom, or are there differences in the technology that is used?
I will first talk about the situation in Hong Kong, then I could possibly discuss the situations in other Asian countries from my knowledge. So basically in Hong Kong, because our legal education is regulated by the Law Society of Hong Kong, meaning that any changes or any significant decisions on the changes of our school policies regarding the examination method, the assessment method, as well as the mode of learning, should be discussed with the Law Society and should seek their approval before any further steps should be taken. So because of that, most law schools in Hong Kong adopt the same method. As you mentioned, we use the Zoom as the major or the main platform for us to attend lessons and to possibly interact with each other, so on. And I think it's become a new normal now for us to use Zoom, and that different schools, however, have various methods in assessment and so on, and that could lead to a problem. For example, in my school, in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, as I've mentioned a few minutes ago, we have the lockdown system, which regulates students' activities during the examination to prevent any possibility of cheating and so on. But some other law schools may have different methods in Hong Kong. For example, say at HKU or CityU, they could have take-home examinations, meaning that students could simply submit a paper within the deadline and without the need of installing a lockdown browser system, which regulates activities during the examination. So we have a wave of debates in Hong Kong on which method of examination or which method of assessment works for the best interest of our students. And then another controversy we face here in Hong Kong is that whether law students should be given the chance to apply for pass-fail of their grades, meaning that during the pandemic, some students actually contest that they should be given a chance to apply for pass-fail, and they don't have to be graded during the examination, because they think that the pandemic has a very negative impact on their education and so on, and it's unfair to grade them as they have been during the normal situation, so on. But the law schools in Hong Kong are very divided in the implementation of the assessment method. For example, in my school in Chinese University of Hong Kong, our professors insist that we need to have our grades calculated because they're very important for our future. They don't want our employers to see that, well, some particular law subjects are not graded, but simply indicate pass or fail. They think that this would be an issue and would affect our possibility for job application successfully in the future. While some law schools think that they should give a higher degree of flexibility to our students for them to choose whether to apply for pass-fail or to apply for grading. But that could lead to unfairness because some students may think that, well, I'm not particularly good at that subject. That's why I could apply for pass-fail, and that to escape any effects on their cumulative GPA, and it may help them get a first-on degree because they exempted the grading of some particular subjects that they're weak at. So there are a wide range of debates and controversies in Hong Kong, and we have student representatives within our system. Let's say in my school in CUHK, that student representatives actually discuss with our program directors and our associate dean to reach out a conclusion or a consensus on which type of examination assessment method is for the best interest of our students. And I think that there's not a perfect solution to all of the questions mentioned. So in the Hong Kong context, I would say that there are still some debates over particular topics, and we hope that there would be a better solution in the future to address those problems. But for the other Asian countries, for example, I come to the knowledge that, well, for example, in Sri Lanka, the pandemic actually affects their entrance to the bar examination, because I noticed that in Sri Lanka, for example, the law students have to attend the bar exam in order to be admitted to be legal practitioners. But because of the pandemic, the bar exam in last year was postponed in the middle, and then the formats could be ever changing in Sri Lanka. And Zoom is a very typical method of hosting lessons in their country, but there are some controversies also in their online examination methods. So basically, there are a lot of reported cases of cheating by students during the online examination and so on. Mm-hmm. And there could be other types of solutions in other countries. For example, in Myanmar, the whole academic year is stopped, is suspended. So to them, the pandemic has brought a much huger impacts on their education system. So the State Administration Council in Myanmar, actually, there are some problems there and so on. And then a few students actually tried to reach to the government to enlist a reopening of school and so on, but the school is still suspended. So I could imagine that the law students, my friends from Myanmar, are facing a kind of a bigger challenge compared to us during the pandemic. And also
yeah. Also I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry. Also in
say in Philippines, for example, mm-hmm. They need to pass through the solutions or pass through the decisions of the bar association chairperson and so on. They also gave chances for students to choose whether to attend the bar exam this year or next year. Mm-hmm. But you can imagine that if all students or most of the students attend the bar exam in next year, then the attendance will be doubled, and that would mean that it will increase the administrative cost of the association.
And do you think, or do you have as ALSA a common point of view on these different challenges, or is it up to every national chapter to define priorities?
I think a good thing about ALSA is that on one hand, we are subject to our constitution, meaning that a lot of decisions will be followed by us on a democratic basis, meaning that in the in the GCM, in the Governing Council meeting, all the national presidents will get together and given one person, one vote to decide on particular issues. For example, whether we should move on to host a particular activity physically. And then if the majority of us oppose to this idea, then you can imagine that the activity would be cancelled. So from an international level, we actually need our consensus. We're not a one-man talk. We need the ideas of all our national chapters to form a consensus, to form a solution on how to tackle certain problems and so on. But from a national perspective or from a local perspective, you could say we are given a lot of flexibilities in having our own stance or having our own perspective or our own solutions towards different challenges we are facing. For example, myself, as in my personal capacity, I think that we should turn most of our activities online, but we need to be practical. For example, currently the pandemic situation in Hong Kong actually improves. So we are trying to host some physical activities in the coming, say, August or September for our students. Say we could adhere to the regulations by our governments regards to any physical contact in public. And on that basis, we could gradually resume our physical events and so on. And I think that this challenge brings us opportunities, like what I've mentioned. We are given a lot of flexibilities in our decision making. We could make use of this opportunity to create more and more chances for our students to broaden their horizon and so on. But for other national chapters, for example, say in Macau or in China or in Taiwan, they may think that it's not a good chance for them to resume the activities during the pandemic. So they may be less active during the pandemic. But I think it's totally fine because we are given our autonomy in managing our personal, our national affairs within this organization and so on. So I think that I respect their decision and so on. But for, like, say, other national chapters, they would prefer having some communications with other counterparts because we think that exchange of views is very important, especially as we mentioned, we're now living in a global village. We're not living in a cave. So if we could exchange our views and so on, then we could tackle the challenge together with more insight and so on. So in my capacity, I fostered a collaboration with ALSA Singapore, ALSA Philippines. We call it ALSP, to launch a legal camp for our law students in September. So it will be an online camp, presumably. So we hope that we could exchange our views for the pandemic, during this very difficult time. And I think it's always a good thing to collect ideas from people from all walks of life, to gain their insights, because some of the experience could be transported to Hong Kong, for example, say for the experience in Philippines or in Sri Lanka or in other countries and so on. So I think knowledge could be transferable. So on one hand, we have our autonomy to face a problem with our own methods, but on the other hand, we still welcome and we are still actively seeking help and seeking collaboration with our friends from other jurisdictions, other countries, and so on.
I understand. So I think the key value here is diversity and learning from each other, and it's not so much unification, right? So it's not a realistic scenario that the Asian Law Students Association will come up with a white paper or a policy paper asking for a specific way how to teach law or how to study law. It will be more up to the national chapters or even the different local universities, and within the local communities, then perhaps even competing universities. So it's very much about diversity, correct?
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I see. Rowdget, that was very, very interesting. Let me perhaps ask one final question from my perspective, which is, if you are looking a little bit more ahead into the future, so in 2 or 3 or 5 years as a practicing lawyer, I don't know how many years you will still have to spend until you are a practicing lawyer, but then let's imagine that you are in this position. What will be your opinion then about the pandemic and your opinion about the behavior of the Asian Law Students Association during the pandemic and the impact of your association on how universities and faculties dealt with the pandemic?
Okay, thank you, Nicholas, for your questions. So I think that maturity will change our point of view towards a great deal of aspects. So I can't really foresee what I would say in the future or how I would comment on my own association in the future. But I think it's always good to look back, to go retrospective in order to reflect our own mistakes and to incorporate our previous experience in our future challenges. So I think that's always a good practice. I would imagine that the pandemic would change my life both positively and negatively. But I would say I would be more optimistic in the future, because as we all know that studying law or practicing law is a very tough and difficult job, which is why many law students quit law school each year. So in order to finish our job, in order to handle our job well, we need to be optimistic. It is a very key attitude towards our life and so on. So I would say the pandemic did have caused us some troubles during these few years, but we also have a lot of opportunities. And this is why I could have a chance to meet you, sir, online, and then I could have a chance to speak at your famous program at YouTube. So I think that these are all chances created indirectly by the pandemic and so on. And looking back in a few years' time, I think I would still appreciate the chances I have. I'm a Catholic, so I would also extend my gratitude to our Almighty God for giving us some backup during the pandemic, during the difficult period of time and so on. And also on my comments on ALSA, the Asian Law Students Association, will be that there are always more that we could do. I appreciate the efforts of my counterparts, my colleagues, my friends from the association. They did a very brilliant job in launching a series of activities for our students. And it's not easy. Although it's held online, we still need a lot of manpower to monitor the activities. We need somebody to check the attendance. We need somebody to monitor the Zoom functions. We need others to handle the registration and so on. So I think all of these are working experience that could help us with our future jobs or our future works as a fully fledged lawyers. So I think the pandemic has opened our horizon to a greater extent. We would be more brave. We would be more daring to seek out, to reach out to foreign people for networking and various purposes. So if I would need to suggest a few ways to improve my association and so on, I would say that I suggest we will hold summits for all our law students association regularly, say in summer or in December, because that right now, as I've mentioned, we did have collaboration and a memorandum of understanding with ALSA and other continents associations, but we don't have a one-off event that is particularly made for all the leaders to get together to discuss, say to have a roundtable discussion, etc. And I think that's very important. And this is why UN is here, because we are living in global village. And if we have regular meetings, then we could share our insights in a one-off basis every year. We could share our insights and our methods and so on, and that could inspire us to a tremendous level. So my suggestion would be that we could form a larger, say, international law students association in the future that includes ALSA, ELSA, Australian, etc., so that we could get together to form a larger organization that serves our Earth, our world as a whole. So that's my futuristic perspective of my association.
Yeah, but that's a very positive and very, very demanding perspective, I think. So there's plenty of work to be done, but we let's start with it today. Rowdget, I thank you very, very much, most warmly. This was very interesting and very impressive. I wish you all the best for next year at campus, or remotely, however it will be, and for the future career that you are facing at the moment. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today. I think the Europeans in the room learned a lot about Asian perspectives, which is always important. And I hope that we stay in touch, that you stay interested and connected with us. And in particular, and most importantly, I hope that you stay healthy or become healthy as quickly as possible. All the best to all of you, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.